All right, so today we're looking at macronutrients. Tomorrow we'll be looking at micronutrients, but we are looking at our recommendations for how these nutrients are going to sort of interact with the body. Yes, but also like how to translate that chemistry information to practical lessons for our clients, right? Because that can sometimes be the hard part, right? Like you can know everything there is to know about the chemistry of a carbohydrate, but you don't know how your body responds to it, and sort of like how to pick a good carbohydrate at the grocery store, that's not going to help you overall. So that's sort of what we're looking at here, right? We're going to get into some of the more practical lessons of things today. So starting with carbohydrates, we know that they are obviously a very important big part of our diet, not only when it comes to like optimizing health, but also performance, because we know that carbohydrates are a good immediate source of energy, which if you're going to be an athlete, that's going to be very helpful, right? We like a good immediate source of energy. So they can play a really big role in that. They also help us recover from exercise. I'm sure you guys have ever, you experienced that kind of like run down feeling after like a really hard sporting event or activity, even a really hard workout. Sometimes you'll just feel like a little bit wiped out the next day. But if you get some carbohydrates really quickly after your physical activity, those sugars go straight into the blood, which goes straight into the, are going to go in through the liver real quick, and it's going to refill all those glycogen stores that you might have emptied out during your workout. So that can always be really, really helpful there. So we definitely know that we need sufficient carbohydrate intake there. So what is a carbohydrate? As a review, you guys know, it's an organic compound, and it's made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, right? Those are the three sort of ingredients to make a carbohydrate. And we are going to split this into two major categories. We're either going to have simple carbohydrates or complex carbohydrates. So simple carbohydrates, also more commonly referred to as simple sugars, are going to be two categories. We're going to have our monosaccharides and our disaccharides, just like we talked about yesterday, right? Mono standing for one, that's a single sugar molecule. Disaccharides, that stands for two, that's a double sugar molecule. So your monosaccharides that you got, you're going to see glucose, fructose, and galactose. And then if you were to put glucose and glucose together, you end up with maltose, that's a disaccharide. If you put glucose and fructose together, that's how you get sucrose, and that is the sugar that we find in our coffee, in our foods and pastries. That is the classic like table sugar that they are just adding to all of our foods. And then you've got galactose, which is glucose plus lactose. I'm sorry. You have lactose, which is glucose plus galactose. I always get those backwards because to me it seems like galactose should be the added together. It seems that labeling always seems backwards to me. But yeah, glucose plus galactose is how you get lactose, and that's the one that you find in milk, that oftentimes makes people who are lactose intolerant a little, gunky feeling. So those are our simple sugars, right? So generally, when you look at like simple carbohydrates versus complex carbs, you're going to see lists that look like this, right? Like we look at our simple carbohydrates, and it's kind of funny because you're like, well, you said it was sugars, right? Why? Oh God, that's a tiny picture. You said it was sugars. Like, why would white bread be up there? And it's like, here's the thing, man. Like, white bread has a lot of added sugar in it. Like, let's look at like Wonder Bread nutrition facts. I always use Wonder Bread as an example because it's what I grew up eating. But you can see if you actually look at the nutrition facts panel, total sugars, it's like 5 grams. There's a lot of sugar in bread, at least in that type of bread versus whole grain bread, which would be much more complex. Energy drinks or sodas, candies, obviously pastries, chocolate, even like I actually would not say French fries counts on this list. I mean, it has sort of broken down the potato to where you're left with sugars, I guess. But like, I don't know, I wouldn't put French fries as a simple carb. I would put them as an unhealthy carb. But I think that's sometimes you'll see that on lists, that I think that's one of the reasons why things get a little confusing. Because here's another really good list of simple carbohydrates. right? Milk, and obviously like table sugar, fruits and vegetables actually count. So it's funny, I look at this list here and like they got fruit over here listed as a complex carb. Fruit is not a complex carb. Like it is very simple. It is mostly made of sugar. So this to me, we should, take this, whoever made this infographic, they're half right, but I think what would, be a lot more accurate would to say that these are like healthy carbs and these would be like unhealthy carbs. I think that that's a much better descriptor, right? Because fruit still falls under that simple category, but it is very healthy, even if, again, this is why like I'm not fully anti-sugar in general. From a chemical standpoint, I'm a fan of sugars. I think they can be really healthy for us, but the way we eat sugars in our typical diet are very bad for us, right? Like candies and sodas and things like that. That is those are basically irredeemable foods. So our complex carbs are going to be 3 or more sugars linked together. We're usually going to list these as either starches, which glycogen is an example of that starch, or fibers. And fibers are fully unbreakable down carbohydrates. Like they're so complicated that our body doesn't have the tools necessary to break those down. Now you will see what are called oligosaccharides. These are like semi-complicated carbs, but like maltodextrin, you'll see that added to a lot of foods and stuff. That, like when you look at white bread, for instance, a lot of the starches that make it up are technically maltodextrin, which is still pretty freaking simple. A lot of the complex carbs found in protein powders is often maltodextrin. You can even buy, if you want to, like if you have a hard time gaining weight, if you have a hard time putting on muscle and you are trying to up your calories, but you don't want to just up your fat intake, you can actually buy maltodextrin powder, and it basically tastes kind of like sugar. It's a little less sweet than like table sugar would be, but it's literally you can see this one here. This is the one that everybody in school used to buy when I was in school, but Carbogain. And it's literally just like, you look at the supplement facts, the ingredients is literally maltodextrin powder, and that's it. And so a scoop is 60 grams of carbohydrates, 240 calories, and it's just all sugar. I mean, it's not sugar. It's I shouldn't say sugar. It's all an oligosaccharide. So it's kind of similar to high fructose corn syrup. That's another somewhat complicated carb, slightly more complicated than actual sugars. And then corn syrup, also slightly more complicated, but all of those oligosaccharides are still pretty darn basic, pretty darn simple there. So they're going to break down. If you really want to get a complex carb, you want a slow burning carb that's going to give you lots of long lasting energy, you want to go with something that is more traditionally considered a starch or something that has a lot of fiber in it. So those are our monosaccharides. Those are our disaccharides. These are our oligosaccharides. And our polysaccharides are complex carbs that are going to be much healthier for us. Those are going to be, grains, legumes, potatoes, yams. I mean, I never consider yams their own category, but they are technically their own thing. Those are like the veggies that you're going to think of, right? So those are going to work really well. And then you're also going to find lots of like fiber in a lot of these foods as well. Like if you look at a yam, right? Right, like this is your kind of classic like sweet potato, right? And so if you look at its nutrition facts, you'll notice that it is actually very sweet. Like sweet potatoes. Actually, let's look at that one in particular. Potato nutrition. You look at a sweet potato more traditionally, right? Let's say we have we'll do 100 grams of a sweet potato, right? Or we'll just do one 5-inch long sweet potato. It's going to have 112 calories in it on average. And then you'll see that it's like 26 grams of carbohydrate. It's got 5 grams of sugar in it. You're actually going to find a pretty good chunk of sweetness in sweet potatoes. That's why they taste better, and they're very popular amongst bodybuilders. Bodybuilders, they're always going on and on and on about how good sweet potatoes are. And they are very good. You're going to find they're rich in like vitamin A, for instance. They're packed full of vitamin A. That's not listed here on this label, but that's what gives it its reddish orange color. So sweet potatoes are really, really, really healthy for us because they do have like a lot of starches. And then there's also 4 grams of fiber here. So the fiber is the part of the yam that we can't break down. Like now, if you skin that yam, if you skin the sweet potato, right? Like when you were a kid, I'm sure your parents made you, peel the potatoes while mom got dinner ready. That process, that's stripping away the fiber. The fiber is the outside membrane of that potato that sort of protects it. And we want to consume that fiber. Not only are there some vitamins and minerals trapped within that skin, but also that's where we get our fibrous, part of our digestion that can't necessarily be broken down. And we love that because like fiber is so complex that as it passes through our digestive tract, it kind of pulls anything that we haven't broken down out of the body, which is really, really beneficial for us, right? We don't want to leave those materials sitting in our gut because, that just means that bacteria can have something to chew on, and that can make us sick, that can cause all kinds of problems. Also, we're blocking off our absorption of other good nutrients, which is not so great. So that's what fiber is, these very complex chains of carbohydrates that our body can't necessarily break down. So those are our major categories. So what's the job of carbohydrates? Like, why do we need carbohydrates as part of our diet? Well, like I said, they're a very good immediate source of energy. I mean, even complex carbs, once they're broken down, they're just sugar. And so they raise our blood sugar levels a little bit to get us back to neutral. We also consider carbohydrates to be protein sparing. And what I mean by that is like, we've talked about anabolism and catabolism plenty in class until now. You guys probably have a pretty good understanding of what that is. And so if you don't get enough calories in, what happens? Your body has to get those calories from somewhere else. So ideally, it's going to break it down from your glycogen stores and keep your blood sugar levels at neutral, or it'll break down fats and metabolize your fats for energy instead. But if it can't do those things, like if you do not have enough energy coming in, your body goes, man, like we got to get our energy from somewhere. And so it might break down protein. It might turn protein into carbohydrates. It might break it down through, remember we call that gluconeogenesis. We'll see that later today. But it'll break down an amino acid and convert it into a molecule of glucose. And now you can't use that protein to repair your body if you exercise. You are burning it for energy, and that's not so great. We want to avoid doing that. We want our protein to be used to repair the body. We don't want to use our protein for calories. Not that it doesn't have calories in it, but so they're considered protein sparing, which means they protect the body from catabolizing protein for energy production. They're a very good source for our nervous system. Your nervous system in particular loves to use glucose. It's sort of its favorite fuel, because again, your nervous system is a very fast acting, explosive system, right? And we know that fast acting stuff, we prefer to use glycolysis for energy. It's the primary source of energy for that. And also it helps us metabolize fats. So remember, when you look at like how we're metabolizing fats can only go through the Krebs cycle, but the Krebs cycle runs off of lactic acid, right? So having some carbohydrates that get broken down into a little bit of ATP and a little bit of lactic acid, you have that lactic acid, which can then go through the Krebs cycle, and then it can also metabolize fats while it kicks off the Krebs cycle. So you'll sometimes hear the phrase that fat burns in a flame of carbohydrates. You'll hear that phrase every now and then, fat burns in a flame of carbohydrates. So in order to facilitate beta oxidation, which is how we oxidize fats in the Krebs cycle, we need carbohydrates as sort of a precursor for that. And so we like to have some carbohydrates. Again, it is going to help us burn fat. And it's so funny because like the world of marketing, the world of diets, has sort of convinced all of us that carbohydrates are the enemy, right? And they're what make us fat, you know? And it's like the reality is like carbohydrates should be a pretty good chunk of your diet if you are on like a fat loss routine, because it can kind of help with that. So fat burns in a flame of carbohydrates is what you'll often sometimes see. And then, like I said, fiber is a very, very important part of our diet. And so if you are consuming a goodly amount of carbohydrates, as long as you're picking the right type of carbohydrates, you're probably also getting a goodly amount of fiber. And fiber has been shown to reduce not only certain like digestive disorders, but it also reduces our risks of cancer for two separate reasons. You talk about the idea of like colon cancer or digestive cancer, pancreatic cancer. You look at a lot of different types of cancers. We're going to talk more about cancer tomorrow when we look at micronutrients, because it has a very interesting interaction with micronutrients. But if you look at like what cancer often causes, different types of cancers, you'll see what are called free radicals. And what a free radical is it's basically an unhappy molecule. Okay, so like take a look right here. Remember, go back to sort of high school chemistry, right? Every molecule in the universe has like a certain number of protons in the center that determines what element it is, and it has a certain number of electrons around the outside. A free radical is basically a molecule that's missing an electron. So see how like all these electrons are kind of paired up and they're happy, right? So this is a molecule, I believe, of, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, this would be a molecule of oxygen. And it's missing an electron here, right? So what it's going to do is it's going to try to steal an electron from some other element, some other chemical out there in the world. Now, antioxidants are actually willing to donate their electrons away. Antioxidants, by the way, vitamins A, D, E, K, vitamin C, and a couple of the B vitamins, and a few minerals. Again, we'll talk more about antioxidants tomorrow. But basically, you kind of want to think of it as like a sort of a meat shield, you know, like I don't know if anybody knows that term, but that's the term that you use to describe, like, I used to play like video games, like when I was playing like first person shooters, then you like, you know, you kind of like have like a non-player character. You're like, I'm gonna send this person into the room and they soak up all the bullets so that I don't get shot. You know, like that's kind of like what an antioxidant does. It sort of protects you by sacrificing them. They're willing to give away their electrons. That way, this free radical would normally just steal an electron from anything around it, and that anything around it could be your body, right? That could be you. So you can see here, no, that's not the picture I want actually. Oxidative stress is what we call it, is where your body loses its electrons. It's you know, having them stripped away. So free radicals will sort of attack a cell, and then that cell will be damaged. And if that cell's DNA gets damaged, remember your DNA is your blueprint. What it will do is it will make a derpy cell. It'll make like a not so well functioning cell. It'll sort of copy itself, but it will be an imperfect copy, and then it doesn't function the way it's supposed to. So now it's a non-functioning cell that you've created. And then if that non-functioning cell makes a copy of itself, you've got 2 non-functioning cells, and you got 4 non-functioning cells, 8, 16, 32. And now you have a mass of non-functioning cells, and that is more commonly referred to as like a tumor. And that is, you know, that's what cancer kind of is, right? So fiber helps combat this cancer in 2 different ways. Number one, you are not leaving materials in your digestive tract, which could oxidize and then start stripping electrons from your tissues. All right, you're just kind of getting it away from you, right? You're just cleaning it out. Your fiber goes through, pulls that stuff out of your digestive tract, and, you know, you leave it, you know, outside the body, right? That's great. That's one of the reasons why, you know, we have fiber. The other thing that it does that's very, very beneficial is the fact that like some of that fiber does survive to, I mean, obviously it definitely survives. It all survives, but it survives into your large intestine. Now, your large intestine is filled with gut bacteria. And this is one of the reasons why they say probiotics can have like a positive anti-cancer benefit. Once it gets to your large intestine, your gut bacteria starts eating that fiber, and it's like a, they're think about bacteria, they're kind of like little critters, they're like little pets. I'm getting weird, but that live in your large intestine, and you're feeding them, and they're going through like a life cycle. And what does every animal do? It poops out stuff, right? Well, in this case, it poops out these fatty acid chains that can get into our bloodstream, that are very, 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 very good for us. They have found that those fatty acid chains not only reduce your risk of heart disease, but also can act as antioxidants and have been shown to reduce your risk of cancers. So fiber is good for us for two very separate reasons. And so we are fighting cancer by getting plenty of fiber in our diet. And so when we focus on like what carbohydrates to eat, right? Should I get my 30 grams of carbohydrates from like a bowl of ice cream, or should I get it from like a whole grain or vegetable? I'm going to go with the whole grain or vegetable because it's going to have more fiber in it, which is going to benefit me greatly. I'm going to get the same amount of calories, the same amount of energy from those things, right? But I'm going to get a much sort of healthier version, right? Let's look at soda nutrition facts, right? Am I going to get my 40 grams of carbohydrates from one can of soda, or should I get it from eating 1.5 sweet potato, or 1.5 cups of sweet potatoes, right? Which would be 40 grams. I would say the 1.5 cups of sweet potatoes is going to be a lot healthier for me, even though it's the same amount of energy, right? Not to mention the fact that one's going to spike my blood sugar and the other one is going to raise it slowly. So we love fiber because it's a really good way for us to clean out our digestive tract. So generally, when we are giving carbohydrate recommendations, we are helping our clients choose from a list of complex carbs, right? We want to, and by the way, you're going to have handouts that you can give your client that basically look just like this, but you can give them like example complex carbohydrates, right? Where it's like whole grains, brown rice, fruits, fruit is not complex. It's got some skin on it, but it's not that complex. Starch, but it is healthy. Starchy vegetables, beans, lentils, quinoa, oats. This should just say potatoes in general, like potatoes are all very good for you. I know that sweet potatoes are kind of like the most popular like kid in school, but for the record, like all potatoes are very good for you. Like if you're low in potassium, yellow potatoes are incredibly good for you, and sweet potatoes don't have very much potassium in them. So a blend of like sweet potatoes are like the most famous, and I'm not really 100% sure why, but they're all very good for you. And then like chia seeds are really, really good for you and a good source of magnesium. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to give our client a handout, and it's like, look, if you're going to have carbohydrates, this is a list of very healthy ones for you. Yeah, they're everybody's favorite because they're sweet. So that is the list of where we want to get our carbohydrates from. Now, how do we figure out how many carbohydrates to eat? If you're trying to figure out your macronutrient intake, we're going to use this. We're going to introduce this concept today called the AMDR, the acceptable macronutrient distribution range. And so the AMDR, oops, sorry, 1 second, guys. I got somebody texting. This is very important. My deepest apologies. Oh, god dang it. Sorry. Okay. So AMDR, let's introduce this concept, the acceptable macronutrient distribution range. Okay, so what this is it's a range or intake of a particular macronutrient. So there's a range or intake of proteins, fats, carbs that is associated with a reduced risk of disease. So Marvin, I know we talked about this briefly, but when we talk about the idea of like calculating out your macros, right? Figuring out what your macronutrient ranges are, the FDA and the CDC are going to recommend these ranges that are considered like optimal, right? So if we look at like macro examples, you know, oh yeah, of course it's going to pull up Excel actually. Macro, let's see here. Calorie examples and calories and stuff. I want to find a couple different. There we go. Here's some different examples out there. So here's a couple different common macronutrient ranges, right? Like here is, oh no, that's the macronutrients found in different foods. Macro diet example. Oh, come on. Ranges. Come on, internet. Stop being, just show me what I want. There we go. You'll see stuff like this. Now, I'm not saying this is actually true. This is just an example that I'm pulling up. So you can see this example here, to maintain your weight might be, oh, this is being, that's so stupid. Why? Oh my gosh, sorry. That is a very dumb, there we go. Chart that nobody diets that way. Sorry, here's a good one. 35 to 50% protein is this is a weight loss program here. 35 to 50% of your calories from protein, 20 to 35% from fat, 25 to 45% would be from carbs. This is what is considered. I'm not saying this is a good one. I'm just saying like this is considered a weight loss one according to this website. Here's one that's like more for maintenance, where maybe 35 to 55% comes from carbs, 25 to 40 comes from fat, 25 to 40 comes from protein. This is probably a little bit closer to like the standard diet that we see. And then here's like a muscle gain program where it's like 45% carbs, 35% protein, 20% from fat. This is actually probably my favorite on this list. Whether I have a client on a weight loss program, a weight gain program, or just a maintenance program, that is probably my favorite. So that's a really good one because this is very similar to the CDC recommendations. So if we look at the CDC AMDRs, you're going to see these are their recommendations right here, right? They're going to recommend a diet of 45 to 65% carbohydrates, 20 to 35% fats, 35% from protein. That's actually not 100% accurate. They have a range of protein. Yeah, it's 10 to 35%. Because if you're not active, if you're sedentary, it's 10. It can be as low as 10% for your protein. But if you give a client who's very active, 35% is a pretty good recommendation. Now, I will say this isn't going to be perfect for everybody. Like, let's consider somebody who's on like a 2,000 calorie diet, right? If they're eating 35% protein, that's 700 calories from protein a day. There's 4 calories in a gram of protein. So we divide that by 4. That's 175 grams. That's honestly the amount of protein that I need as like a 180-pound person who needs to eat like 3,000 calories a day. So this 2,000 calorie diet, if you picked the highest percentage of protein, you're probably overdoing it a little bit, you know? Like a 2,000 calorie diet would probably be for somebody who weighs maybe 140 pounds. So they're way, you know, eating a lot of protein, which means their kidneys might be working a little hard. And that's why we want to have a range here, right? We're going to say anywhere from 10 to 35%. So we have a different way of calculating out protein that I'm going to teach you guys later. But if you were to simply punch this into a macro calculator, Honestly, it's a very simple approach to exercise. But if you had a 25-year-old, 5'10", 165 pounds, we hit calculate here, and you can see it's going to give us a pretty decent range. Here's a fairly decent, well-balanced diet: 155 grams of protein, 340 grams of carbs, 72 grams of fat. So if we look at that in a pie chart, right, that's going to be 155 times 4, and then it would be 340 times 4, and then it would be 72 times 9. So that is a total of 2,549 calories. So 620, 2,549. So that's 24% protein. So we got 24% protein. We've got 1360 divided by 2,549, 53% carbohydrates, and then the remaining is in fat, 648 divided by 25% fat. So that's actually pretty close to the CDC's recommendations, right? We went right in the middle with 55% carbs. We went 25% protein, so halfway between 10 and 35. And we went 25% fat, which is on the slightly higher range, but similar. So we're introducing AMDRs right now. This is the first time we've seen this. We're going to talk more about this when we actually break down macros on Monday. But the recommended amount would be 45 to 65% carbohydrates on average. Now, me personally, I usually go on the slightly lower range. I usually go anywhere from 45 to 55% because I am a firm believer that you need to have enough fat in your diet in order to keep your hormones healthy. So 65% to me, if you get 65% carbs, you don't really have that much room in your diet for fat. So I'm not a huge fan of that. That being said, if I was training a marathoner or an endurance athlete, I would absolutely go 65% carbs. And that way they have plenty of carbohydrates for their endurance event. Triathletes, marathon clients, absolutely 65%. Probably go even higher than that if I can. That's why, like, you see marathoners, they can get those like glucose tablets, or they'll eat those like glucose gels and stuff, and they're just like absolutely packed full of carbohydrates. So that is how we want to consume our carbohydrates, right? Anywhere from about 45 to 65% of your total caloric intake is going to do you pretty well. Those numbers, by the way, were calculated because if you look at like the difference between athletes here, generally these are our carb recommendations, right? Like a recreational athlete who's not super competitive, it's maybe 3 to 6 grams per kilogram of body weight per day, probably closer to 45 to 55% of their total intake. You look at like an ultra endurance athlete though, they're probably going to get anywhere from 10 to 12 grams of carbohydrates per day per kilogram of body weight. My roommates and I are watching The Boys right now, which is a very depraved, very intense show for anybody who has seen it or knows about it. Very intense. But there's this one superhero who's like a runner. And he's very fast, and he has to eat he's like I have to eat like 12,000 calories a day, which makes sense because he has a super fast metabolism. It's intense. And it makes sense that he has a super fast metabolism, like as a sprinter, he can run, 1,000 miles a second, so he would need a massive amount of carbohydrates, would be a very good example. So what are some good sources of carbohydrates? Where can we find some good sources? Well, like I said, whole grains are probably going to be your best bet. So things like rice, particularly brown rice, because that would have like its fiber and it would still have that. Although white rice, I'm not anti-white rice. If you're a big fan of like jasmine and things like that, that's actually very healthy as well. Not a good source of fiber. but still relatively healthy. Oatmeal would be a really good example. Quinoa is a really good example. Spelt berries or wheat berries are good ones. Couscous can be a really good source of grains, right? But then we can also get a good chunk of our carbohydrates from like fruits and vegetables as well, right? Vegetables, and you can get those. By the way, there's not a huge difference between fresh or frozen. I will say, or canned even. A lot of times people will say like, oh, well, fresh vegetables are going to be better than like frozen vegetables. Well, you got to remember some like the vegetable loses nutrient content the second you pick it off the vine. And so it sits on a shelf, it's losing nutrients over time. Whereas like a frozen vegetable goes straight into a factory, gets frozen immediately. It's probably going to preserve some of those nutrients. Some of them are going to get destroyed from the extreme cold and stuff, but some of them are going to get preserved. So here's a general rule of thumb. And NASM has an article about this. I'll go ahead and link this actually. Fresh or frozen vegetables. They have a pretty interesting article here that you can read. Here it goes. Oh, that's actually not it. Where's the NASA one? It's so funny. They've got 4 results here. None of these are the article that I'm actually looking for. NASA has written too many nutrition articles that it's not coming up the way I want it to. But I'll link this in the chat bubble here. But this is probably still a very decent. I actually have not read this article, but I'm sure that NASM often repeats themselves. So I'm sure this will have the same kind of thing that I was talking about. But what you'll often see, that's an ironic name, Brad Dieter. What you'll often see is if a frozen vegetable has or like if you look at a vegetable and that vegetable has like skin around the outside of it, maybe like a squash or like green beans or something like that, something with like a protective outer shell, then chances are you'll actually probably be pretty well off getting a fresh version of that. Fresh vegetables will have lots of nutrients in them because like they've been preserved with their skin. But if you're looking at like berries or things that are like where the outside skin is kind of exposed, like a fresh banana is going to have most of its nutrients because it's got that outer skin, whereas like frozen blackberries or something like that, that's probably going to be a better example of like retained nutrients because like it flash freezes and locks in all those nutrients. So that's my general advice. The more exposed something is, the more likely you want to go with a frozen version. The more protected it is, the more likely you want to go with like a fresh version. Or you can just not think about any of it and you can pick the version that you like the best. And that's still going to be a very healthy option. That's the thing, guys. The difference between these is probably going to be so small that it doesn't even really have that big of an impact. It's not like, you should be making this decision of like, oh, well, I'm only going to buy fresh broccoli for the rest of my life. Even, frozen broccoli is probably a little bit better. And if you're like, well, I hate frozen broccoli, then you're just going to eat this food that you hate for the rest of your life. No, probably not. Fresh broccoli is still incredibly good for you. We don't always have to have the best version of everything. That's honestly the type of advice that you need to give to your clients. It's not always about getting the best version. It's just about getting a good version, So fresh, frozen, canned, dried juices. I will say I'm not a huge juice fan. I think juice often strips out a lot of the nutrients are there, but it strips out all the fiber, and fiber is so good for you. So if you're going to do juices, do smoothies instead. Personally, that's personal advice. So each of it is going to have, each form is going to have its own benefits, its own drawbacks. Dairy is actually a pretty good source of carbohydrates, oddly enough. I know we don't think of it as carbs very often. It does have a lot of carbohydrates in it, though. If you look at like milk nutrition, you'll notice that it's got 12 grams of carbohydrates because there's a lot of sugar in milk. So is it a good source of carbohydrates? Well, it's good in the sense that it has carbohydrates. Is it a healthy source of carbohydrates? It is sugar, and it's a naturally occurring sugar. It's not like it's table sugar, but it is still sugar. So something to be aware of. But it is a good source of protein. It's a good source of fat. I don't know. I'm on the fence about milk. The U.S. government loves milk. Me personally, I'm like, yeah, maybe. I like this brand of milk here. I like this Fairlife milk, and I like it with the APA in it, or the DHA in it. This Fairlife right here is my favorite. This is very expensive. I don't really buy, and it's not organic, by the way. I don't really spend a lot of money on like organic foods or anything because I think that there's plenty of nutrients in non-organic sources. So I'm not huge on the organic hype train personally, but I will drop a lot of money on this particular brand of milk, simply because they double filter it, which reduces its sugar intake by half and boosts its protein intake by half as well. So it's higher protein, lower carbohydrate milk. To me, it tastes really clean. I really like it. That's the stuff that I use. We've also got very protein heavy carbohydrate sources as well. Things like beans, legumes, lentils, nuts, seeds. All of those are really good sources. And then you're not going to find any carbohydrates in these animal sources. I mean, you can technically, but it's very low. Good sources in terms of like, you're going to find a lot of carbohydrates. You're going to find them in sweets, desserts, and sodas. However, they are nothing but simple sugar. So they are not very nutrient dense. And that's one of the things that we got to focus on. When we are giving advice to eat carbohydrates, we want to give the advice that you should focus on nutrient dense carbohydrates, not energy dense carbohydrates. We're focusing on getting nutrition, not just calories, right? So this is where a lot of times when we are sort of determining whether or not a carbohydrate is good for us or not, we will often look at what is called the glycemic index. The glycemic index is basically a list of foods showing how much a carbohydrate is going to affect your blood sugar levels. So if we look at the glycemic index here, I just butchered that. If you look at the glycemic index, here's a list of different foods. And you can see the lower on the glycemic index, the less it is going to affect your blood sugar. So like, for instance, white bread and bagels have been shown to spike blood sugar levels because they are broken down already. And so they enter the bloodstream very, very quickly versus like a low glycemic index food, which would be anything less than 55, even like sweet corn, because corn has like all of its fiber around each of its individual kernels, that actually is relatively low on the glycemic index. Or if you look at like bran cereal, which is mostly fiber, or rice bran, which is mostly fiber, that's extremely low on the glycemic index. Look at these, like a mashed potato is already broken down because it's all mashed up and it's usually skinned. So it doesn't have any skin in it. So that's a very high glycemic index vegetable versus like cucumbers or lettuce or peppers or celery or asparagus or broccoli, which are all about a 15. So that does not spike our blood sugar levels. That gives us carbohydrates, but it enters our bloodstream very slowly. Dates, which is one of the simplest sugars out there, raisins, very, very, very high in sugar and very much processed sugar, so it will spike your blood sugar levels, versus like an apple, which is like got its skin on it. It's going to be a little bit more complex. It's going to enter the bloodstream a little bit more slowly. So this is not a list of good or bad foods. It's just a list of like how it affects your blood sugar levels. So if you have a client who's like a diabetic or a client who struggles with their blood sugar levels, well, then paying attention to the glycemic index could give you a list of foods that you want to more commonly focus on, right? Or if you have a client with like hunger cravings, they're like, I don't know, I'm just always really, really, really hungry by time lunch rolls around. And then, I end up going and eating at KFC or something. Like I end up like eating something really unhealthy because I get so hungry. And it's like, well, let's take a look at your breakfast. And you look at their breakfast and you sort of pay attention to where all of those foods land on the glycemic index. And you notice that it's like, they're, drinking like, let's say they're eating like kiwi fruit, which is relatively high, or watermelon, and and it's like I'm having like fruits and vegetables in the morning, but for some reason I'm still really hungry, and it's like you look at they're having like a bagel or something, and it's like, yeah, it's like, you've got these very high glycemic index foods coming in for your breakfast, and they're all healthy in terms of like the fact that they've all got vitamins and minerals in them, but it's just causing your blood sugar to spike. And so then your body processes all that sugar very quickly, and you get really hungry later. And then when you're hungry, you make poor choices. So let's see if we can swap out some of these carbohydrate options for lower glycemic options. And that's going to leave you feeling fuller much longer, which means you're less likely to make those poor decisions. So that's how the glycemic index is. And here you can see is another sort of example of that. We love carbohydrates as a fuel source during our exercise activity, right? We know that like exercise causes us to mainly stay in, it's a high intensity activity, and so we're going to use glycolysis as an energy producer, which means that we want to have plenty of like carbohydrates available to fuel that glycolysis. So your body loves to use that during exercise. The higher the exercise intensity, the more likely you are to need carbohydrates. This is where you'll sometimes hear of what is called the crossover point. This is more commonly referred to as the fat burning zone. We talked about this when we talked about respiratory quotients. So in low to moderate exercise, you're not burning very many carbohydrates for energy. You're mainly metabolizing fat as a fuel source. If we look at, oops, not calculator. We look at the respiratory exchange ratio here. Where's my picture? Not those charts. It's so much easier to see it when it's just laid out side by side. Come on, internet, just give me the picture that I need. Why are you being so difficult? There it is. There's one particular one that I always pull up as my example, and I can't see it today. So if you look at this ratio right here, you can see at an RQ of 0.7, where you're consuming only 70% of the oxygen you bring in, you're mainly relying on fat as a fuel source, 100% of it, right? And then if you're sprinting as hard as you can, you are mainly relying on carbohydrates. So we're always at a blend somewhere between there. So at an RQ of 0.85, where you're consuming 85% of the oxygen you bring in, but 15% of it's not getting used, then you are at about a 50-50 ratio. That is the crossover point, right? So as intensity goes up, the amount of calories that you are burning from fat goes down, and the amount of calories that you burn from carbohydrates goes up. So a lot of people will tell you that you should exercise right around 0.85 because that maximizes how much fat you are burning while also maximizing the amount of calories. But the reality is you burn way more calories when you work super, super, super hard. Now, obviously, those calories are coming from carbohydrates, which might make you think, well, that doesn't help me because I'm trying to burn body fat, right? But remember, you have to recover in the fat burning zone when you are done exercising, right? And so if you can burn a lot of calories here and recover down here, you'll actually end up burning more fat calories in the end. And that's why interval training has been shown to be more effective. So the crossover point is the point at which fats become the main source of energy. As duration increases, intensity will naturally lower and fat will be utilized more for energy production. So what we want to focus on is we want to focus on using carbohydrates as a tool that will help us work very hard, and that will cause us to need to recover in the fat burning zone. And that's why we like interval training and why it's important to get enough carbohydrates in your diet. So you love to keep carbohydrates stored in your body. You're going to keep about 400 to 600 grams worth of carbohydrates in your body. That will translate to a couple of pounds of carbohydrates. Now, Obviously, that doesn't make any sense when you think about it. You're like, why would I have a couple pounds of carbohydrates if it's only 400 to 600 grams? Well, the way we store glycogen is we mostly store it in water. It's this very watery, wet, soupy material, right? That's our glycogen. So when you have a client who loses, like, they go on a diet, a lot of times you'll see people go on a diet. They'll go on like a crash diet of like 1,200 calories and they'll lose like 3 or 4 pounds in the first week. Most of that is the fact that their body has tapped into their glycogen sources. They haven't actually changed their body composition hardly at all. So when somebody loses a very quick 1 to 2 pounds, a lot of times that's what we call that water weight. And they lost that water weight because they burned through their glycogen, and glycogen is filled with water. So their liver's a little lighter. Their muscles are a little lighter, but they didn't necessarily lose very much body fat. I mean, they probably lost some body fat. To be fair, they lost some, just not an amount to substantiate. So generally, that's about how many calories you store. So we store about 16 to 2,400 calories worth of carbohydrates in our body at any given time, which means you're going to burn through that first before you start tapping into your fat if you are exercising. Now, fat cells or adipocytes, if your glycogen stores are full, your body will then store all of its energy in fat cells instead, right? So if it has nowhere to put your excess like carbohydrates that you consume, it doesn't have anywhere to put it, it's going to put it into adipocytes. And adipocytes are single fat cells, right? Average person has an estimation of about 90,000 calories in each fat cell. That is a crazy amount of energy. And that's why we always say we have essentially an unlimited supply of energy coming in our fat, or coming from our fat, I should say. So it's going to take a while to tap into those fat cells and burn those off as energy. That is definitely something that is going to take time and effort over a very slow source. So in general, our main recommendations is that like a very efficient source of energy is our carbohydrates, and that gives us the energy necessary for us to work very, very, very hard in the gym. And if we can do that, then our body will then have a very high elevated calorie burn. And that calorie burn will mean that whenever we consume energy, whenever we consume calories, it will go to restore those glycogen, or it will be repairing the body to fix any of the damage. And this is why we like carbohydrates. This is why we should not be anti-carbohydrates. So in general, our recommendations are a couple hours before exercise, try to consume some complex carbohydrates along with some fluid, because that fluid is also going to help you make glycogen. Try to pick some carbohydrate-rich protein sources as well. If you can get like a relatively good amount of protein in with your carbohydrates, like pasta or beans or things like that, that can actually make sure that you then have protein in your body as well before physical activity. And you can start that repair process while you're working out. A couple hours before, probably focus on like a carbohydrate beverage that can actually boost performance slightly. I don't recommend that for the average client. I only recommend that for actual athletes before athletic events. But a couple hours before, like a Gatorade or a coconut water or something like that, which is mostly sugar. And I know like we're usually anti-sugar, but in this case, it's a tool to boost performance during a physical activity. I think that can be very handy. So you want to then also make sure that post-workout you are restoring your glycogen, which means you probably want to ingest some carbohydrates within an hour to 2 hours post-activity so that we can get that glycogen restored as quickly as possible. Now, that is going to hinder weight loss initially because you are you're not losing water weight now. So weight loss, yeah, you're hindering weight loss by restoring your glycogen, but you are not hindering fat loss, right? Because if you can restore that glycogen, guess what? You're going to have plenty of energy to exercise tomorrow. It is not about the workout you just did. It is about restoring your energy so that you can work out again the next day. And that's one of the reasons why we should always consume carbohydrates post-workout. I know we always talk about protein, and that is important for sure, but it is also very important for us to get the adequate carbohydrates in. So adequate carbohydrates is very essential for optimal performance during physical activity. We want to get somewhere between 45 and 65%. This is 55 to 70 here. This is for athletes specifically. We want somewhere between 45 and 65%. Generally, we want to focus on complex carbohydrates rather than simple carbohydrates. And the best sources that we are big fans of in order to get those complex carbs are whole grains, fruits, vegetables, and we can pay attention to the glycemic index to see how much that is going to affect our blood sugar levels. Generally, we want to have a low, slow burning carbohydrate. So something that is not going to spike our blood sugar levels, something that is going to get our blood sugar levels sort of boosted and go, right? Think of it as like, imagine if your car, you know, like have you guys seen Mad Max Fury Road? Like if you've seen that, at one point, like he like drinks gasoline and then like spits it onto the engine of the car, like from the outside, and the car goes and it makes these big flames, and the car gets a big boost of speed for a second or two. That's great, but it's not a very good long-term plan. Like imagine putting jet fuel in your car. Yeah, it's going to give you a big boost, but you're also probably going to blow your engine out. In our case, what that means is, our body's going to go, wow, we got a big source of energy. And so you're going to get a big burst of energy, and then you're going to want to take a nap afterwards. And then you take that nap, and then you wake up and you're going to be hungry, and you're going to be like, I need food because I have no energy. I burned through all of it, right? And then all of a sudden you're going to make poor choices, and you're probably going to give yourself another big burst of energy. And this is going to be a vicious cycle that kind of repeats. Versus like a nice, long, slow burning option that is going to leave you feeling full and satiated and happy and energy full, but maybe not like hyperactive energy throughout the day. So any questions on carbohydrates, guys? Questions or comments or anything you're worried about?
Okay, quick question.
Yes.
So the way you were talking about the Mad Max part where he's like spitting the fuel into the engine like that. How would you say, does our body produce that? Not gas and all that fuel stuff, but like that boost of energy right away for like the gym or anything. But what would be good to boost that energy as not taking pre-workout or anything like that?
Yeah, so obviously like caffeine would have a similar effect. Caffeine is going to boost temporary performance as well. Like caffeine, they ban it in you're allowed to have it in the Olympics, but they ban certain levels of it because they know that, yes, it does give you boosted energy. So I don't think like Olympic athletes are allowed to take pre-workout because it's too much. They can have like a cup of coffee. Like actually, you know what? Let's look this up. How much caffeine is allowed in the Olympics?
Would it be, Brad, that like you said, that it would be them making sure they don't overexert themselves in the gym so they can come back the next day?
No,
and they rest well, like after they get their good well rest, they get to come back.
No, the reason they're doing it in the Olympics is they're just trying to level the playing field because not everybody can have caffeine. Some people, and yes, it would be dangerous at certain levels. But I guess it's 12 micrometers per milliliter of caffeine is what they're allowed to drink, which is very complicated. That's a super complicated way to look at it. Surprised just doesn't have a number of milligrams, which would be way easier to analyze. But I don't know. Olympics are, they do blood tests, so they're very specific. So yeah, so you're talking about like that. Yes, it would have a boost. And so like if we're going to use carbohydrates and we want to use carbohydrates as a tool to boost performance, generally our recommendation would be like, all right, you're about to go into a physical activity. Yeah, let's pick like a poor choice carbohydrate. Let's eat some dates, right? Dates are 100 on the glycemic index. One of the highest sugar fast, they're basically just pure glucose. So when you eat it, it goes straight into the bloodstream instantly. So if you were about to, let's say, like run a 400-meter Olympic sprint, right? Maybe 20 minutes before you eat a couple dates. And so your blood sugar level gets super high and you get the rattles. You're like, oh, I get so much energy, right? And then you run your athletic event, you hopefully win, and then like you're in a really good spot, that's great. I love simple sugars as a tool to boost and athletic performance, right? But it's not a very good idea for the average office worker, I mean, all of us right here, we're all sitting here, right? So if I carb loaded a bunch of dates because maybe that's the snack that I like to have in my house, it's probably not a very good choice for me, because right now I'm going to be sitting like this while I'm on this call, just like bouncing, like I got all this extra energy and I'm like, I'm all rattly, and then I'm going to have like a major hunger craving because my blood sugar level is going to spike. My body's going to go, holy crap, our blood sugar level is high. And then it'll make a bunch of insulin. And if it makes too much insulin, my blood sugar will plummet and it will drop really low. And this is where you get that sugar crash, right? And then all of a sudden, like we're cranky and it's like, God, I need to eat something right now or I'm going to kill somebody, right? And so then all of a sudden I put myself in a vicious cycle. So I think it's a tool to be used. I like high glycemic index foods, but they should be eaten with intention, not as like a part of our diet. So the general advice that works for 99% of clients out there is focus on complex carbs, because 99% of clients are not, like Olympic athletes. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
What's your question, Amber?
What was it? Because I know I didn't eat, and it's most likely because I didn't have any energy too. But when I was running cross country, I had ran I ran I believe it was 100-yard dash or a 400. Oh no, it was a 400. And I passed out right at the end. I know I didn't eat, but I was like, I won, but then I passed out.
Yeah, that's classic. It's either pass out or you throw up, right? The 400 will make you throw up more than any other athletic event out there. 400-meter dash is arguably, and in my opinion, one of the hardest events in all of sports that exist. Because it's just short enough that you can sprint the whole thing, and it's just long enough to make you nauseous.
Yeah, and I kind of like took my time around the first two curves, and then the last two curves I kind of like sped up.
Chances are your body just plummeted it burned through a lot of glucose very, very quickly. And then your body was like, holy crap, safest thing to do, shut everything down, so that we can preserve energy, so that we don't start tapping into energy from muscle mass and neurons and things like that. So you probably just did that. And then there's probably something else at play as well. You might have had like a lack of oxygen or something.
Oh man.
Your body, if you experience like a dramatic drop in blood pressure, for instance, your body will often make you pass out. That's why if you've ever like stood up too quickly and then the whole world, that's because your blood pressure fell through the floor. You dropped your blood pressure too low too quickly. And what'll happen, and your brain goes, oh no, safest thing to do is lay me down. So passing out is also just a protective mechanism. So there's a million things that could have caused that. I'm not sure what the actual cause would be.
But was that kind of like an example too of like spitting out energy and then just like, not having?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I would say maybe. I'd say it's a possibility. I can't say with any certainty, but yeah, I would say probably, maybe. Yeah. Okay. There's too many things that can cause passing out for me to be able to just say.
Oh yeah. Of course. I definitely think it's because I didn't eat anything. I just like woke up and I was like, oh no, I have a track meet.
Yeah, terrible choice. Very dangerous.
This
right.
is not cool.
So let's look at fats next, right? So we're talking about lipids. We got a lot of different examples. So fat, very vital nutrient. We know that like all of our cell walls, for instance, are made of fats, right? That phospholipid bilayer is what we call it. That's the outside of every single cell you've got. has some fat in it. So it's an organic compound made of the same ingredients that we find in carbohydrates. So this can definitely also be metabolized for energy. I mean, you know, if we're releasing the carbon to get the energy from a carbohydrate, we can do the same thing with fat. So primary source of energy, particularly at rest. Your body prefers to use fat when you are in resting mode. If your intensity is very low, the main source of energy there. It also protects our vital organs by acting as like a temperature buffer. It can carry certain substances throughout the bloodstream, such as your fat-soluble vitamins, and it's highly associated with satiety. Fat in particular can make you feel full for very long durations, which is great. So our recommended amount of fat is going to be an AMDR of about, where is this in the notes? I don't know why it's not in the PowerPoint. The recommended amount of fat that we're going to recommend, according to the CDC, is going to be 20 to 35% of your total caloric intake. Now, obviously, that gives us a range. If you're a very low intensity person, I would honestly say fat should make up the primary part of your calories. So, you know, if you're not exercising regularly and you're a very sedentary person, maybe your diet is composed of, you know, very low carbohydrates and a little bit higher fat. This is one of the reasons why I think the keto diet is so popular. I think this explains its popularity, because it is actually relatively good advice. If you are at a super low intensity, fat is a good source of fuel because it supplies us with low intensity. Do I think it's a recipe for success if you are exercising regularly? That's where I start to sort of disagree, because I think carbohydrates, again, have been proven to boost performance. But if you're generally doing low intensity exercise, which, let's be honest, most people do, right? Most people who go to the gym, they don't really push themselves that hard. Well, maybe a high fat diet actually is the way to go, you know? So I'm definitely not anti-keto. But if I got somebody training with me, I'm going to be pushing them. So then suddenly I start to think, well, maybe keto is not the best way. So we're going to recommend an AMDR of about 20 to 35% on average. And only 7 to 10% of that should come from saturated sources. So when you look at your fat, let's say, you know, you're on a 2,500 calorie diet, then that should be about 250 calories from saturated fat, which really means you should only be getting around 25 to 27 grams per day. Any more than that, and you are, you know, we know that saturated fat has a lot of those cholesterols, particularly the low density cholesterols. There's not a lot of proteins in them, and that can be very unhealthy for us. So when we talk about like what a chemistry wise, what a fat or what a lipid actually is, generally we're referring to triglycerides most commonly. We're talking about food, we're usually referring to triglycerides. That's either your saturated fat or your unsaturated fat, or even your trans fats. But within those fats, you are also going to be consuming some phospholipids, which is a double fat molecule, or sterols, which are the single fat molecules. And sterols, those monoglycerides, are often what will become our hormones. So we definitely like having them in our diet. Looking at our fatty acids, saturated fatty acids, what I mean by saturated, if you look at a saturated fatty acid, you'll notice that you can kind of think of it like this. Take a look at this picture here. This is a saturated fatty acid. Think of this as like a table of carbon, and there's a bunch of seats at that table for hydrogen to be able to sit. In a saturated fat, all of the chairs are taken up. All of the seats are filled, okay? So it is saturated with hydrogen. Versus an unsaturated fat, you'll notice the table kind of kinks, and there's an empty space here and an empty space here. There are seats available at the table. That's why we call it an unsaturated fat. We have unfilled seats, right? And then you either have monounsaturated, where there is one kink, or you can have polyunsaturated, where there's lots of kinks. So monounsaturated fats are actually a very good source of a monounsaturated fat is actually a really good source of omega-6 fatty acids, which can make up our cell walls. And polyunsaturated fats are often filled with omega-3 fatty acids. So those phospholipids that we want to consume, because that's what makes up our cell walls, you know, those double fat molecules, are going to be highly associated with our unsaturated liquid fats. And you think about like the difference between like a solid versus a liquid versus a gas. You know, go back to high school integrated science, right? The difference between these is the shape of the molecules, right? Like, look at how much space there is. Well, actually, hold on. We're looking at, that's water. There we go. Look at the difference between these, right? Look at how much space there is in a gas. There's a lot of empty space available, right? In a liquid, there's still a lot of like empty space available. And in a solid, everything's very tightly packed together. This is one of the reasons why you can almost identify what type of fat you're going to be consuming by looking at it visually, right? If we look at a solid versus a liquid fat, you'll see like olive oils and things like that. Those are typically unsaturated fat examples, right? So when you look at like a jar of a cup of olive oil, or you think about like avocados, very oily. You know, if you squeeze an avocado, it breaks down. It's like juicy, right? Canola oils, or if you look at like nuts often have that like oily texture around the outside of them. These are all very like unsaturated fat examples versus like a stick of butter, or like when you look at the gristle on like steak or beef, right? Generally, that is going to be a very saturated fat. Lard is a good example, right? These are all you know, eggs that, well, eggs are actually kind of a mixture of both. I shouldn't use eggs as an example. Cheeses are solid, right? So generally, when you look at like cheese, you'll notice, like, let's look at 1 tablespoon cheese nutrition facts. Actually, I'm not probably going to find a good. Okay, so we look at 28 grams of cheese. Okay, that's 1 slice of cheese in this example. And let's look at olive oil nutrition facts, which would be 14 grams. So we'll just double that. So we'll say 1 slice of cheese, which would be 2 tablespoons worth of olive oil, right? That would be the same mass. You're going to find 14 grams of fat in 1 tablespoon. So that means you're getting 28 grams of fat in the 2 tablespoons of olive oil, 28 grams, right? Versus the cheese over here, where you're actually only getting like 9 grams of fat, which is way less, right? So we're getting 28 grams of fat in the olive oil, 9 grams of fat in the cheese. And that's because like the mass of the cheese, right, is made up of like, there's some sugars in there, there's some protein in there, right? There's other stuff in the cheese. But let's look at the amount of saturated fat. In 2 tablespoons of olive oil, you would be getting 4 grams of saturated fat. And in 1 slice of cheese, you'd be getting 6 grams of saturated fat. So even though there are only 9 grams of fat, 66% of the fat in a serving of cheese, 66% of it is saturated. That's why cheese is solid at room temperature, also because of the proteins. The proteins are also going to be solid. Versus like olive oil, which is 2 divided by 14, which is only 14% saturated fats. And that's why that one's going to be a liquid, right? Because again, you look at like, imagine stacking a bunch of stuff with kinks in it together, you'd have a bunch of empty gaps, right? All these like interesting kink shapes, right? If you put those in a bag, right, there'd be a lot of empty space in that bag versus stacking solid, just big straight lines, right? You can make like, imagine like, you know, a bunch of pasta, you know, there's not a very lot of space between each of those individual strands. So that's the difference between saturated and unsaturated. And that's why saturated fats tend to be solid at room temperature and why unsaturated fats tend to be liquid at room temperature. And why you're also going to find more phospholipids in your unsaturated fat rather than your saturated fat. So we like the unsaturated stuff. We like oils rather than solid fats. That being said, I am going to completely flip my opinion if you superheat those oils. So I have nothing against vegetable oil or peanut oil or canola oil. I know that there are healthier options out there, but if you want to cook with canola oil or you want to cook with vegetable oil, go for it. It's a little bit higher in the omega-6s rather than the omega-3s. I like omega-3s better, so I like avocado oil better. But hey, you can still go for it. I have nothing, you want to cook with that, go for it. I think it's fine. However, you need to be cautious about overheating that oil. If you superheat that oil, what starts to happen is you end up with what's called a trans fat. And trans fat is what we get when we deep fry things. So like trans fat are going to be like our deep fried foods, right? Fried, all of this stuff. We're going to find a lot of trans fats in there. Now, what a trans fat is where you actually take an unsaturated fatty acid, like monounsaturated or polyunsaturated avocado oil. You take some type of healthy oil, but then because you superheat it, it ends up pulling hydrogen out of the atmosphere. That's what's causing it to boil and bubble, is it's just ripping hydrogen out of the atmosphere. And that straightens out those kinks, right? That is very, very, very bad for us because we have now good fats, unsaturated fats that start acting like saturated fats. And that's what a trans fat is. This does not happen in nature, by the way. This is something that humanity invented. And so the addition of hydrogen atoms, we often see this as hydrogenated oils, is how you get your trans fats. So when you are reading a nutrition facts panel, let's look at natural peanut butter nutrition facts. Let's take a look at natural peanut butter, right? And I mean this type of stuff that separates, right? Yeah, there we go. So we're going to see the ingredients. This is still somewhat non-natural, actually. It's got some added sugar in it. But we look at the ingredients, and it is going to be peanuts, sugar, palm oil. So it's actually adding some oils in there. And then a little bit of salt and a little bit of molasses, which is more sugar. So that way it stays, unseparated. By adding those sugars and molasses and stuff, it keeps the oils from separating. Because when you look at natural peanut butter, you'll often see it do this. See this right here where there's like all the oil at the top? That's all the unsaturated fat. And the bottom is all the saturated fats and the proteins. So they've all sort of sunk to the bottom because they're just not as dense. So the ingredients in this, peanuts, and a little bit of salt. That's it. So this is much more natural than this. But let's take a look at like Skippy peanut butter. Let's take a look at the standard old peanut butter that you would buy, not natural, this one right here. Ooh, I can't read that. There we go. So what you're going to see is roasted peanuts, sugar, hydrogenated vegetable oil. That means that it is vegetable oil that has been superheated. That is trans fats right there. Anytime you guys see the word hydrogenated in your ingredients list, throw it away. It's garbage. And here's what really, really sucks about this. It probably has about 0.4 grams of trans fat per serving, which means because it's less than 1 gram per serving, they are able to go over here and you will notice that the label says 0 grams of trans fat. And that might make you think that there's no trans fat in this food, but that is not true. That is inaccurate. It has hydrogenated oils, but it has less than 1, and the FDA allows food companies to be allowed to round down. So this is garbage food. I am not very harsh. I do not like to tell people what not to eat. And when it comes to dieting, I like to tell people what to eat more than I like to say what not to eat. This is the exception to that rule. Stay away from hydrogenated oils. here's the thing. We're all going to have a slice of pizza. We're all going to have fried foods every now and then. Trans fats in the US are practically unavoidable, but you don't have to buy them. That's the difference. Yeah, what's up, Carlos?
Yeah, quick question. Right there at the bottom of the label where it says vitamin A, calcium, vitamin E, what is the one underneath iron?
Niacin.
Niacin.
That's vitamin
Okay.
B2.
Okay.
Right? Or B6.
Because I was tripping out on it right now. I was just like, that's first I've seen that.
B3. Crap. Niacin's B3.
Okay.
Yeah, you get a bunch of B vitamins. They got 8 B vitamins that we got to talk about. We'll get to those tomorrow. So yeah, not a big fan. I love peanut butter. Not a big fan of the classic peanut butter, which sucks, by the way, because it's way tastier. Like, I love that peanut butter because they add sugar to it as well, and it's delicious. It's smoother. It's way easier. You don't have to stir it up every time. It is tragic to me, but not good for us. All right, so then we got our essential fatty acids. We've actually already talked about these. Your essential fatty acids are your omega-3s and omega-6s. Those are sometimes called linoleic and linolenic. Ugh, that's hard to say. Those are your essential fatty acids. That is your omega-3s and your omega-6s. They are essential because your body cannot make them itself. It has to get them from your diet. Now, generally, you're going to get those from fat sources. You're going to find them in your diet pretty naturally. Even steak has omega-3s in it. Very little, but has some. But we've also got omega-9s. I believe there's omega-12. We've got our non-essential fatty acids. Your body can basically synthesize those itself as long as it has natural fat. So we don't really have to worry too much about it. However, you aren't going to find as many essential fatty acids in butter, steak, things like that. Your animal sources. You're going to find much more essential fatty acids generally from healthy oils. And that's not, and one animal source that is rich in essential fatty acids is fish. Fish products are going to be packed full of essential fatty acids. Chickens, beef, things like that. There's going to be some, but nothing to sort of write home and brag about. And then we've got our sterols, more commonly referred to as cholesterols. So sterols are little rings that have little proteins in them. We are going to call those lipoproteins because lipids plus protein, right? So there's two major types. There is the low density and the high density. Now, to be fair, there is a third type. We are losing people left and right here. There's a third type as well. That is going to be your high density lipoproteins, your low density lipoproteins. The third type is your VLDL, very low density lipoproteins. That's your trans fats. That's why they're actually so bad for you. Remember I said they are like unsaturated fats that then act like saturated fats. You are basically throwing so much hydrogen in there that it's losing density and it's stripping proteins. So what you end up with is this big, empty, low density lipoprotein. And what it will do, it wants to be dense. It wants protein. So you know what it's going to go and do? It's going to steal proteins from your high density, good cholesterol. That sucks. You know, like that's why VLDLs are so bad for us. That's one of the reasons why trans fats are so bad for us. VLDL versus HDL cholesterol. So very low density lipoproteins, which look kind of like this right here, are missing. Look at how much proteins are, like these little Y's right here, the little gray bits. Those are all proteins. This is like low in fat, high in protein. This is great. Versus this freaking thing, which has like one little protein and all this fat. So you know what it's going to do? It's going to strip those proteins away. It's going to destroy your good cholesterol. That sucks, right? So that's what trans fats are. They are what used to be good fats that became evil fats. Any of my super nerds out there if I've got some, who are Lord of the Rings fans. If you remember this scene, if you remember this scene from The Lord of the Rings, where like Saruman's talking to the Uruk-hai and he's like, do you know how the orcs were made? They used to be elves. And then the Sauron tortured them and twisted them and buried them under the ground and made them into orcs. And that's how we invented orcs. That's like a trans fat. It's like you took this thing that used to be awesome and then you just messed it up. Now it's all damaged. And it's going around trying to destroy its brethren. You know, like it's my nerdiest moment. And but yeah, that's basically why we want to stay away from VLDL cholesterol. We also want to stay away from just general LDL cholesterol. The low density stuff tends to get stuck in our blood vessels, and that can increase our risk of heart disease. That causes those blockages, and if we get those blockages, well, guess what? You're not going to be able to deliver oxygen to your tissues, and your tissues are going to die. So that is why we are avoiding bad cholesterols. So how do we recommend our clients eat fat? Generally, we tell them, hey, get 20 to 35% of your calories from fat every single day. Good piece of advice. And further than that, let's just try to make sure that less than 10% of your calories is coming from saturated sources. When I say I want you to eat fat, what I mostly mean is like nut oil, like peanuts, natural peanut butter, or olive oil, or fish oil, or, just, the fat found in fish, right? Those are all really good sources. Those are our recommendations. And that's where you're going to get that. So the linolenic acid, that's your EPA and DHA. That's your omega-3s. Linoleic acid, that's what you're going to get from, those are your omega-6s. Usually get those in olive oils and vegetable oil. That's why they say that vegetable oil isn't as good as like olive oil. Olive oil is higher in linolenic acid, which is your omega-3s, and vegetable oil is high in omega-6s. And both of those are essential, but we don't really have a hard time getting omega-6s in our diet. Like they're essential, so you need to get them in your diet, but we just don't have a hard time doing that. The omega-3s we have a hard time with. And one other thing that's like kind of part of this conversation that NASM doesn't really touch on, but a lot of people are theorizing, when the ratio of omega-3s and omega-6s gets really out of whack, like you just have a lot of omega-6 and not very much omega-3, we have also seen that start to cause like inflammatory problems. And so like joint pain, inflammatory disease, which can lead to cancer and stress, is kind of associated with that. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword in a way. It's like we need omega-6s. They are essential to our diet. But when we get too many of them, and they are healthy, they are like categorically healthy. But when we get too much of them, they do kind of start to cause problems. And so that's where that gets really complicated when you start getting into that. But basically, this is why just tell your clients, try to get at least one fishy meal a week. If you can do that, you're probably at least somewhat balancing those two back out. Or take fish oil as a supplement, that can be a really good source as well. That does get really, really, really complex, honestly, guys. And that's why NASM doesn't really weigh in on it. And that is something that, like, if you do have inflammatory disease, okay, let's talk to your doctor, and see if your doctor can give you some recommendations, put you on like a krill oil or a fish oil pill or something like that, and that can have a positive benefit. So what about where are we going to find these fats from? Well, you're going to see some fat in whole grains. Usually it's unsaturated, right? It's a grain that has like oils in it and stuff. Although not much fat is going to be found in breads and things like that. You're going to find a lot of fat in like biscuits and croissants because those things have butter in them, and usually like vegetable oil and stuff. And they usually cook biscuits and croissants. They want them to be crispy, so they usually cook them at super high temperatures, which turns those unsaturated fats into trans fats, which we don't love. So we don't love biscuits. We don't love croissants. Fruits and vegetables. usually don't have very much fat in them, but nuts generally do. That's where you're going to get like olive oils, avocados, peanuts, things like that. Dairy is a good source of fat, but I wouldn't call it necessarily a healthy source of fat because most of it is going to be saturated, which, by the way, you do need saturated fat. I'm not anti-saturated fat. It's just we live in this version of the world, and in this version of the world, people are eating way too much saturated fat. So the advice we have to give is like, it's kind of bad for you. Is it actually bad? No, it would be fine if it's in moderation, but we get too much of it. So dairy is a good source of fat in the sense that it has a lot of it, but I wouldn't argue that it's a healthy source of fat. And then protein, also a good example. Animal proteins is a good source of fat. I'm not sure I would call it a healthy source of fat, right? Unless you are looking at like fish. Fish is a really good source of omega-3 fatty acids, which we love. Cholesterols, we're going to find lots of those in animal products. Remember, it's coming from an animal's body. Your body makes cholesterol. Well, if you were to eat that, it would increase your cholesterol levels. However, that being said, we are finding more and more every day that the amount of cholesterol found in your diet doesn't impact the cholesterol in your blood as much as we thought it did. Like, it makes sense that like eating it would boost the levels in your body, but it turns out that it doesn't actually happen that much. So we're a little bit less worried about it than we used to be. That's why you always hear people say like eggs are bad for you, and now they're like, well, eggs are kind of good for you, right? That's why we watched that that comedy sketch. It's like we used to think eggs are bad. No, our information's changing all the time. But generally, you will see cholesterol in meat products, egg products, dairy products, and a lot of like baked goods, which have meat, or, egg and dairy in them, like cake. So generally, we're looking at the amount of cholesterol in our blood. We want to pay attention to having the good cholesterol in there, right? That's the HDL, high density stuff that's going to protect us against cardiovascular disease. And we want to avoid getting the LDL, which is often going to cause cardiovascular disease. Now, we obviously will utilize some fat during exercise, particularly low intensity exercise. And so we can metabolize fat during like low intensity, long duration exercises. And that's where we pay attention to that crossover point again. As the intensity goes up, the calories burned from fat goes down. As the duration goes up, intensity goes down, which means the amount from fat goes up. So this is where long, slow cardio can be effectively fueled through like fat intake. So our recommendation before exercise, we probably want to focus on a low-fat meal. Here's one thing that we haven't talked about yet. Your body will prioritize processing fat quickly because it's a fuel source before it will prioritize processing protein, which is kind of a bummer if you are trying to build muscle. So my recommendation is to focus more on like low fat near your workouts, and then you can get high fat later at dinner, like towards the evening. And if you do that, you will then like sustain on fat as you sleep, which is low intensity. And you'll keep it away from your workouts, which means that your body will prioritize bringing in carbohydrates to restore your glycogen, bringing in protein to restore your muscles. So me personally, I say keep your fat after exercise to minimum levels, and that way we put the emphasis on your carbohydrates and your proteins rather than your body emphasizing processing that fat. So fat, very vital nutrient because it's a good source of our fatty acids to make cell walls. It's a good source of our cholesterol to make hormones. We definitely need that molecular structure from fats. High fat diets have not been shown to improve your endurance, even though it is associated with long physical activity. However, it can be the fuel source during that physical activity. It just hasn't been shown to boost performance in any way. So generally, we want to focus on like a moderate fat intake, anywhere from about 10 to, at the highest, 35% of your diet. Any questions on fats, guys, before we move into proteins here?
Quick question.
What you got?
So talking about fats, are we talking about like food that helps you gain certain fats?
When you say gain certain fats, I'm sorry, I'm not quite sure what you mean.
Is it okay? So like anything that we eat, I honestly, I don't know, I'm so lost right now. I'm thinking about my workout today for the gym. I'm so sorry.
Oh,
Because
I mean, when I say like stay away from fats near your
yeah,
workout,
there you go.
mean?
There you go.
Okay,
Sorry.
gotcha. No, I just mean fats in general.
Okay.
Because your body, whether it's saturated or unsaturated, your body will go into like processing mode. And it will do that to the fats. And we're like, oh, it's slowing down protein synthesis. And we kind of want to like keep protein synthesis happening, which, right after your workout, you know what I mean? Because the longer you wait to repair your muscles, the more likely it is to repair them less, like to not repair them as much. We want to get started on that repairing process like immediately, right? So I always tell people like wait a couple hours before you have like a big fatty meal. If you're getting like 3 or 4 grams of fat, like you look at a standard whey protein shake, right? It comes from milk. So it's usually got like 1 to 2 grams of fat in like a scoop of protein. That's fine. Like, don't worry about that. Don't try to go fat free after your workout, but if you're getting like if you say you're going to drink a cup of milk after your workout for like recovery, you don't have a protein shake, you're going to drink a cup of milk, probably go skim milk or 2%, because if you're doing like whole milk, you get like 5 or 6 grams of fat there. And I'm like, that might slow things down a little bit, but even 5 to 6 grams, that's not much, So my recommendation is focus on carbs and protein pre and post workout. And then for the rest of the day, try to get your fat in. And that's great because also fat's going to leave you feeling full. Exercise is already an appetite suppressant. And so it reduces your hunger levels, which sounds crazy. I know that sounds crazy because I'm very hungry after a workout, but mid-workout, it's a appetite suppressant. And then your body goes, all right, we're done working out. Great. Now I'm hungry, right? That's afterwards. So afterwards, get your carbs and your protein. That'll leave you feeling somewhat full. And then you will make healthier choices when you feel full throughout the rest of the day. You know what I mean? So you don't get that appetite suppressant. So generally, I focus on getting most of the bulk of my fat later in the day. So if I work out in the middle of the day, for instance, and I'm going to pick a chicken source, I'm going to go with the chicken breast. If I worked out in the morning for lunch, I don't know, chicken thigh or breast. I don't care. Either way. Does that make sense?
Yep, got you.
Cool.
That's pretty much how it was last night because last night was my first day in the gym.
Oh yeah, you got the new memberships.
Yeah, and there was these two guys next to me, and they were shredded. You know what I mean? They were a lot smaller than me, but they were like shredded, right? And I'm doing my sets, and I'm doing my own, like not my own, but I'm doing like what I learned from school, like the workouts, like the curls and everything, and from the class that you were showing us. And I'm standing there, and I have my hands on my hip. And I'm like, yo, what's up, guys? How you guys doing? Get that money, And then they were like, yeah. They were like, yeah. They're like, hell yeah. And then I was like, yeah, this is my first time in the gym. And they both stopped what they were doing, stared at me and said, this is your first time in the gym? You don't look like it. And then I was like, oh, no, in this gym. This is my first time in this gym. And they were just like, oh, okay, bro. Because they were like, you're pretty big this is your first day and stuff. But it was crazy because after my workout, I ate what did we make for dinner? Pasta, the pasta shells with ground beef and the red sauce for spaghetti kind of style.
Yeah.
So I ate 4 bowls. I ate 4 bowls of that.
So that's still really decent. I will say ground beef is probably pretty high in fat.
Yeah.
You might be a little bit better off with like ground turkey.
Okay,
But that's not me saying that there isn't room for pasta shells and ground beef. I would just say like, hey, have that for lunch, a little bit further away from your workout. You know what I mean?
Okay.
If you're trying to optimize. But again, like this is that kind of conversation where it's like, we're being real optimized here,
Yeah.
And it's like, how much of an effect does it really have? Probably not much, and probably not as much as we sort of visualize in our head. You know what I mean? The real priority is to get the protein in, which you did a great job of. So I would say, like, look, if that's how you're going to eat after your workout, fine. I don't think that's bad by any means. But if you ever get to like crazy, just you got to be real optimized, then maybe we put a little bit of emphasis on that, you know?
Gotcha.
Okay, let's look at protein here. We always NASA was very smart by putting protein at the end because that's everybody's favorite part. So proteins are these big links of amino acids all held together, complex chains of amino acids, and they have a lot of nitrogen in them, right? The nitrogen that's going to be found in that protein is what gives each individual amino acid its unique shape. So when you put a bunch of unique amino acids together, you end up with a unique protein. So when we look at that, all that's held together with these peptide bonds, which give it this really interesting shape. But peptide bonds are relatively hard to break, which is why you have your stomach acid. Stomach acid is got this material in it called pepsin, which makes it pretty good at breaking down those peptide bonds. So you can see here, this is an example of what an amino acid would actually look like. We got this little R section here, and you'll notice that glycine looks different than phenylalanine. These are somewhat similar looking to one another, but they got the same sort of backbone here, right? HNCCOH, right? H and H. This looks practically the same in both these, but this little side chain here, the R, that's very different looking. In this case, it's very simple. It's just a little bit of hydrogen, a little bit of oxygen. But over here, hydrogen, carbon, hydrogen, and then an extra little ring, a little acid ring there. So definitely, phenylalanine, I would argue, is much more complicated than glycine. Not that we have to worry too much about that. In general, as long as you're getting adequate protein, you are going to be getting all of these amino acids in. So the shape of that amino acid is what determines the shape in the body. So whether it's a bone or a ligament, tendon, hair, fingernails, muscles, teeth, your DNA, your enzymes, the walls of your organs, all of those are going to be made up of different proteins, and they're all going to be slightly different shaped than others, and certain people are going to produce more of certain proteins than others, depending on who you are, what your genetics are, and things like that, right? One of the most important that we got to talk about are going to be our enzymes. Enzymes are, kicking off some of those biochemical reactions that we need to make every day in order to do stuff. So it makes a lot of sense that we need to get protein in our diet. The recommended amount per person is going to be anywhere from about 20 to 35%. That is your AMDR of protein. So now, if we think about it, we've got our recommendations here. Let's say, we recommend, 45% of your calories are coming from carbohydrates. We say, let's say 20 or 25% is coming from fat, right? And that leaves us 30% for our protein. There's our 100% of our calories per day. You do that, it's pretty good in balance. That is going to ensure that you're getting adequate protein to repair any of the damage that you make while you're in the gym and while you're living life, while you're also getting plenty of fat to produce hormones and cell walls and things like that, and plenty of carbohydrates for energy throughout the day to keep your intensity nice and high. And that's our AMDRs. That's our conversation on Monday. We're going to be looking at AMDRs and recommendations more intensely on Monday, but that's our general recommendations. Obviously, we can make some adjustments there depending on the client. If they're like, I love fat and I love protein. Okay, cool. Let's lower the carbs down a little bit. If they're like, I love carbohydrates and I like to be very physically active all the freaking time. Cool. Let's boost the carbohydrates. These are ranges, guys. We've got adjustments we can make. So we love proteins. They are going to make up our antibodies and our immune system. We definitely need to have protein for that purpose. They are going to help us maintain our fluid acid base, pumping materials back and forth. They transport substances. Hemoglobin, for instance, is a protein. And yeah, they can be an energy source if they need to be. We try not to use them as such, but they can be. So you can see like various different proteins out there. And the easiest way to draw protein is just to kind of draw a squiggle, because that's sort of what it looks like at the end of the day. But so when we talk about amino acids, we're going to see this word essential again. Remember, we talked about essential fatty acids Essential, whenever we're talking about biology, guys, it means that it is essential that you eat it because your body can't make it, right? Like actin is not an essential nutrient in the body. Now I need actin in order to have like muscle fibers, right? So it is essential as part of my body, but it's not essential to my diet. I can get amino acids and proteins from plenty of sources out there, right? However, in order to make those things, I need to have all the essential amino acids, which I could get, from other foods. So when I say something is essential, it is essential that it is obtained from your diet. Okay. Generally, we associate our essential amino acids with what we call a complete protein. A complete protein is a protein source that contains all 20 amino acids. Every animal product, if it came from an animal's body, is going to be a complete protein. Whereas like plant-based sources are usually going to be missing one or more of the essential amino acids, right? So non-essential amino acids, your body can produce those just fine, right? So alanine, arginine, proline, glycine, all of these amino acids over here. So you're going to see 9 essential amino acids, 11, now, I will say there's also tyrosine, and then there's cysteine, which you'll notice like cysteine and tyrosine are both considered non-essential amino acids. They can sometimes be considered what we call it conditionally essential. I don't usually talk about conditionally essential because it doesn't come up that often. But these are non-essential amino acids that suddenly become really essential if you don't have enough, particularly leucine, in your diet. So if you do not get enough leucine, you can't process these other two, which means you need to be getting them from your diet directly. Otherwise, you won't be able to make them. That doesn't really ever happen. Like it's very uncommon. It sometimes happens in like vegans. Again, if you are a vegan who is not doing a good job of like pairing fruits, grains, vegetables, legumes, all of these different sources of protein together, you're not getting a mixture of amino acids. Like if you're just getting your amino acids, you're like, I get lentils every day and that's the only thing you freaking eat, then you're getting one source, and that unfortunately is going to be missing some of those essential amino acids, which means it doesn't do you any good to eat that protein. The protein is just going to get converted into energy because it can't convert the proteins into new body tissue. So, but if you mix that lentil with like rice or like a barley or like some type of whole grain, well, now suddenly you're complementing your proteins together and you've created a complete source. Now there are branched chain amino acids. These are more commonly associated with supplements. You guys have probably recognized that in the supplement store, your BCAAs. These are essential amino acids that can also be metabolized for energy, which is kind of cool. This is going to be leucine, isoleucine, and valine. Those are your 3 BCAAs. And you'll notice all 3 of those are essential amino acids. So they're essential amino acids that your body can metabolize for energy directly within the muscle. So the theory here is that if you can really boost particularly those 3 amino acids, you can ensure that your body gets right to protein synthesis a little bit quicker. But is taking it as a supplement going to be helpful is the question. Here's the thing. If you have a low protein diet and you're not getting enough BCAAs in your diet, yeah, take it as a supplement. But if you're eating plenty of protein, if you're getting the right number of grams every day and you're, if you're consuming animal products, I honestly, guys, BCAA, save your money. I don't think it's going to have much of an effect because it's the same example of like, boosting the levels of something. You can't overfill a cup of water. It's just going to spill out onto the counter. You know what I mean? So overfilling your BCAAs doesn't really do anything for you. But if you're on a low protein diet, like a fat loss routine, your calories are low, so your protein's low, then BCAAs can actually be very helpful. Or if you're on like a fast, if you're doing like intermittent fasting or something like that, then yeah, maybe BCAAs would actually be somewhat helpful because it can, you know, it's basically low, it's 0 calories. So you can be on a fast and eat like a BCAA supplement and hopefully ensure that you don't fall out of protein synthesis during your fast. So when we're talking about foods, protein sources, we will often be talking about the difference between complete proteins and incomplete proteins. Complete proteins are animal products. Not all animal products, though. Well, not all complete proteins are animal products. Soy is also a good example of a complete protein. It is a plant product that actually has every amino acid, all 20 of them. Quinoa is another one that is a complete protein that has been shown to have every amino acid. So if you're worried about your protein intake, you can always, as a vegan, consume tofu, which has lots of soy in it, and that soy is going to ensure that you have all of your essential amino acids. So that's another way to do that. You could also do a complementary protein where you put 2 incomplete protein sources together to fill in each other's gaps. Beans and rice, grains and beans, grains and rice. Those 3 things in combination. If you actually look at complementary, you always see this like little love triangle, and it looks kind of like this. Well, in this case, it's a love square. This is weird. Dairy doesn't need to be in here. Dairy is obvious. Dairy is a complete protein because it comes from an animal. So just erase that. Imagine this. Imagine this is a triangle. I always see this. This is the difference between like, this is the vegetarian chart. There we go. This is a good one. Veggies plus nuts. Grains plus nuts. Grains plus legumes. Legumes plus veggies. Legumes plus nuts. Grains plus veggies. You do all that, you're pairing it up. Which, by the way, how are you going to not eat like this? You know, like that's why I actually don't, if I have like a vegan client, I really don't worry about their protein intake. You can get plenty of protein on a vegan diet, and you make sure that it's got a full amino acid profile. I'm really not that worried about it. And that actually is the triangle just laid out differently. So now, when we are talking about getting adequate protein, why are we getting enough protein? Well, again, it's because it's our source of nitrogen, and we need nitrogen to make amino acids, and we need amino acids to make proteins, right? So what we will often determine is what is called your nitrogen balance. Now, I gave you guys the AMDR earlier, 20 to 35% of your protein intake, right? That works. It's not bad. It's honestly a very good recommendation in general. However, if you are going to get more specific, like, should I pick 10 to 20% or should I pick 35%? How do I know how much protein to eat? It really depends on your body weight. It really depends on the individual, and it depends on how you're training. If you're a bodybuilder, you are maximally damaging your muscles. If you're a powerlifter, you are damaging the crap out of your muscles because you're working really, really hard. If you're an athlete, you're working really, really hard. If you're sedentary, if you spend all day on the couch, you're not working very hard. Your proteins don't get really all that damaged, right? Like, I went in for a COVID trial. I think I told you guys about this. I signed up for a medical experiment for the COVID vaccine, and they tested my blood, and they were like, your blood looks fine, but we are seeing a lot of protein in your blood, which means that your kidneys and your liver are working really, really hard. And it's like, what's the deal? It's like, and I was like, well, I mean, I exercised the day before, or the day of like this blood test. Like, I worked out in the morning and then I went and did this blood test. So, I mean, I damaged the crap out of my muscles. I worked really hard that day. And they were like, that explains, they were like, and that's like, I didn't actually say that. They were like, did you work out today? And I was like, yes, I did. But that's the explanation of what happened. They're like, that explains why there's so much protein floating around your blood. I tore it up. I tore up all my protein. I damaged the crap out of my muscles, because it was whatever day it was that I was working out. And so then what that means is I need more protein in my diet so I can repair all of that damage that I just created. So what we need to have, you can think of it as a bank account, right? You need to have more money coming in than you are spending every month if you want to maintain a positive balance in your bank account. So what we do is we call this a nitrogen balance. We just call it that because protein has nitrogen in it. So when you're exercising, you need to be in a positive nitrogen balance. So in order to facilitate cellular growth, we need to maintain a positive nitrogen balance. How do we ensure that you're in a positive nitrogen balance? Well, these are our recommendations in terms of protein. If you're a sedentary person, the balance is pretty easy to make. You're not spending very much money. So it's pretty easy to balance out your checkbook, you know? So we're gonna go with 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. That's gonna be 4 grams per pound. So if you're 180 pounds, sorry, that's not right. Sorry, 0.4 grams. I was like, that is totally wrong. 0.4 grams per pound. You need about 72 grams a day. If you get 72 grams a day, you've got just enough protein to ensure that you're repairing everything and you're in a positive balance. Anything lower than that, you might start to run into problems. Your immune system might take a tank, your muscles might atrophy, you know, not great. If you're a strength athlete who is damaging the crap out of their proteins every day, we recommend 2 grams per kilogram, which is going to be 0.8 grams per pound. So that's, I'm sorry, that's not true. That's 1.8 grams per pound. That's what it is. Get my numbers all mixed up. No, not 1.8. Sorry, again, my deepest apologies. 0.8, not 1.8. If you weigh 180 pounds times 0.8, you need about 144 grams a day to ensure that you are in a positive balance. So if you want to go with 1 gram per pound, you're probably overdoing it a little bit, but at least you're hedging your bets, you know? Your kidneys are going to have to filter out some of that because all that extra protein is just going to get converted into glucose. And then you're going to be left with this extra nitrogen that your kidneys, your liver has to get rid of, and you got to pee it out. But it's not really going to be, it's not going to put you at risk. It's your kidneys they can handle the load. So that's why bodybuilders recommend 1 gram per pound. I have nothing against that recommendation. I think it's overdoing it a little bit, but I also think that overdoing it a little bit is not going to hurt you, as long as you are still getting plenty of carbohydrates and fat in your diet. Carbs for energy, fat for hormones. So the recommended intake is 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight per day for sedentary individuals. That is the number that they're going to actually quiz you on. That's a test question you're probably going to see, which is weird because it's not the recommendation that we typically give our clients. Our clients exercise, so they need more protein. But we are going to base it off the sedentary because that's the CDC's number. So factors that affect your protein intake are your body weight, right? This is per kilogram of body weight, and your total energy intake, how many calories you need, and your training intensity. The higher the intensity, the higher the protein you need. If you are looking at your exercise intensity, right? Protein utilization, right? If you are high intensity, then yeah, like I said, more protein is required. And then also the quality of that protein should also be considered. If you are a vegan who is not getting very good complementary proteins, you're going to need a higher amount of protein in your diet, you know? But for the record, there is a ton of protein in like lentils. I mean, let's take a look at lentils here. Let's take a look at chicken here, right? We're gonna go with 100 grams. If you ate 100 grams of chicken, it's got 27 grams of protein. You eat 100 grams of lentils, it's got 9 grams of protein. That's about 1/3 as much, but it is still a substantial amount, you know? This is 239 grams of, or I'm sorry, 239 calories. This is only 116 calories, literally half as much. So if you were to double this, you'd be getting 18 grams of protein, the same number of calories, versus this, where you are getting, 50% more protein, but you're also getting 3 grams of saturated fat, no fiber. Whereas over here, you're getting a bunch of carbohydrates, plenty, and 8 and 16 grams of fiber, right? So, and you get to eat more food. You're eating 200 grams of food versus 100 grams of food. So I'm a big fan of plant-based protein. I think it's great. I just don't think, me personally, I like to have meat in my diet because I find it easier to stick to, but I don't eat meat because it's a better protein source than plant-based sources. I think that plant-based sources are plenty. Yeah, question.
What about the plant protein powder?
Same thing, same concept.
Same.
I will say plant-based protein powders, they are more specific though. They'll be careful. You will never, usually, I will say, there's got to be a company out there that this is not true for. But I would say most plant-based sources, what they'll do is they'll take 2 different sources. So peas are a legume and rice is a grain. So what you'll usually see is a blend of rice and pea protein. So if I look up like vegan protein powder, nutrition facts here, I'm just going to pick one of these. I don't even know what brand this is. And you look at the ingredients. This is a protein shake. So this is the powder that they've already put into a shake, but it still works for our example. You'll see it says pea protein.
Yes.
Cocoa, natural flavors. Ooh.
So natural flavors is not good. I know that, right?
Well, the thing, it can be good. I don't like that blanket statement personally. You hear people say that, they're like, natural flavors is bad. Natural flavors is often how foods will hide ingredients, which can be bad. But to say that it's always bad is, I wouldn't say that's fully accurate. Like in this case, natural flavors could be, fruit juice.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, you'll see that. I mean, I'd say 9 out of 10 times you're right. Because you'll see stuff like that. People will sneak it in there. In this case, it really is just pea protein. So I actually don't like this. I'm not a fan of this protein shake, whatever this is.
So pea protein is not good. That's what you're saying? Like it's
No.
not.
I'm not saying pea protein is bad. No. What I'm saying is if you are only going to get like a vegan protein, pea protein alone is not good because it's not a blend. It's not filling in its gaps, right? So you want to have a blend of pea plus something else, a grain, because that's a legume. So pea protein and then rice protein. So this one's good. This one I like. So it's got pea protein plus rice protein and then natural flavor, and then cocoa powder, stevia extract. Yeah, that just means natural flavor is not that big a deal. I mean, it is how some companies will hide stuff, but I mean, this is a protein powder. It's a health food, right? So natural flavor in a health food probably just means they're like, I don't know, they don't want to list out some big long chemical name. But that's the thing. People are like, you'll hear the same people who say, don't eat foods that say natural flavor. You'll hear the same people who say that. They'll say, don't eat anything that you can't read on a nutrition label. Don't eat anything that you can't pronounce. And I'm like, what about freaking yogurt, man? Like, I can't, let's see here. Yogurt ingredients. Let's take a look at some Greek yogurt here, which is incredibly healthy for you, by the way. I love Greek yogurt. But look at the freaking ingredients. It says natural flavors, but sometimes you'll see lactis acidophilus and lactis bulgaricus. Right? I can't say that. Like, I took that advice of like, don't eat anything that I can't read. I'm not very good at reading, like I'm not gonna be able to eat anything, so I don't personally prescribe to the whole avoid natural flavors advice. But I am aware, I view it with what I call healthy skepticism, which is like, I am aware of the fact that sometimes companies will hide bad ingredients in there. So if I get a peanut butter, which we talked about peanut butter earlier, they love to hide. If that said natural ingredients, then I would probably be like, what does that mean? You mean hydrogenated oils? You know, like, so yeah.
So I heard that you said peanut butter is not really healthy, right? But they just like talking about peanut butter is very healthy. So
That's not what I said. What I said was I don't like processed peanut butter, right? I love
like
natural peanut butter. I think natural peanut butter is really good for you because it's peanuts. Natural peanut
yes.
butter, if the ingredients says peanuts, salt, I love it.
Okay.
Great. If it says peanuts, salt, blah, 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 and like a bunch of other stuff, I'm not a fan.
Okay.
Yeah.
So peanut by itself is good.
Yeah, peanuts are great. Peanuts are a superfood. Like, love peanuts.
Okay.
They are super rich in the fatty acids that we absolutely need every day. Love peanuts.
Okay.
But peanut butter, oftentimes they're sneaking. The thing is, we don't like natural peanut butter. You bought natural peanut butter with the oil at the top? It's a pain in the butt, right? It's like, God, we gotta freaking stir it. It's a pain in our rear, you know? So we're like, bleh. So then food companies were like, well, what can we do to make people like peanut butter better? So what they did is they added a bunch of other stuff, and now it stays mixed together for you. That's a bad sign. That means that means that we ruin the food to make it spread on bread easier. And it's like, ugh, yeah, it's more convenient, but now it's unhealthy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't like that type of peanut butter. This is so funny. I can't believe how much I've talked about peanut butter today. It's like, that was not my goal going into this lecture, but
I'm sorry.
Here we are. No, it's just very funny.
I brought you back to the topic.
No, it's like, I'm like looking at myself and I'm like, this is very funny that we're talking about this so much. But yeah, that's how all foods are, you know? They were good until we screwed them up.
Okay.
So other factors that affect our protein intake, the age, as you get older, you don't need as much protein. That being said, it almost becomes more important as we get older to make sure we have adequate protein though, because as we get older, we tend to lose muscle mass. So if we're trying to prevent that, we want to make sure we get the protein in. But we do want to avoid excessive protein. If your calories from protein exceed 35%, so one of those macro examples I pulled up earlier was like 50% protein. If that's the case, you might be putting additional stress on your kidneys because remember, gluconeogenesis, which is how we convert protein into glucose, means that you rip the nitrogen skeleton out and you're left with that skeleton. It's just, now we get the glucose, that's what we pay attention to, but all this waste product over here, it's got to go somewhere. So your kidneys have to like filter that out, and that can lead to you dehydrating because your body's going to take extra water to be able to do that. That can increase your risk of, it says cardiovascular disease. That is not protein's fault. It's just that generally diets that are high in protein are probably getting them from animal sources. Animal sources have saturated fat. Saturated fat can lead to cardiovascular disease. So I don't like this sentence associated with protein. It's not protein's fault. It's fat's fault. And cancer's same concept. But it can also excrete calcium from your bones. Your bones are actually attracted to that protein, which means that like it can actually lower your bone density if your protein intake is super, super, super high. That being said, super low protein intake can also lead to calcium deficiency. So we got to be careful about how we balance this out. Again, my advice, and I always say it this way, you need enough protein. You don't need too much protein. You don't need too little protein. You need enough protein. So when somebody asks me, it's like, should I up my protein? I always say, I don't know. It depends on how much is adequate for you. And so I need to know, what type of athlete are you? How hard are you training in the gym? How much do you weigh? How old are you? Those factors are going to determine how much protein we eat. So sources of protein, you get some from grains. There's not a lot of protein in there, but there's some. Some of it from fruits and vegetables, usually a pretty minimal amount in those. Some vegetables are a little higher than others. Dairy, good source of protein. A lot of protein found in milk, it's coming from an animal product. So cheeses, yogurts, all that kind of stuff. Meats, fish, poultry, eggs, all of those animal products are going to be packed full of protein because, they're the body of an animal. Legumes, nuts, and seeds, those are also really good sources. Those are the proteins found particularly in plant-based. Quinoa is a grain that's a really good one. So we like that. When we are taking protein supplements, that's a really good source of protein, but you do got to be careful of the marketing claims that you will often hear, which are things like increases muscle building. It's like maybe, but again, if I get enough protein in my diet, like let's say I have breakfast with like egg whites, lunch with like a chicken breast, a snack with some Greek yogurt, and then dinner with like a sirloin steak, right? All of that had a ton of protein in it, right? And then I've got like beans and rice and other things like in with all those meals, right? Like I got a lot of protein in that diet. I take a glass of milk, with my breakfast, for instance, right? If that all happens, and then I look at a marketing claim on like a nutrition label and it's like increases muscle building capability, and I drink a protein shake, that protein shake might not do anything for me. And if I've already got enough protein from my food, getting more protein doesn't matter. Again, my advice is to get enough protein. But again, if I overfill a glass of water, it's not like the glass gets bigger, right? The glass stays the same size. It's just overfilling and it's spilling all over the counter, right? That's what happens with protein. Too much protein doesn't do anything for you, But that being said, it is important to get adequate protein. So if you do have a low protein diet because maybe, you don't want to spend protein's usually the expensive stuff at the grocery store, or you just don't have the appetite, right? Great. Protein shakes, protein powders, protein bars, those are all really good sources, And so like that can be a good way to hedge your bets. Again, it should be viewed as a supplement, not a replacement. Watch for artificial flavors, natural flavors. We just talked about that. Watch for, I will say artificial flavors in protein powders, I'm less worried about. Natural flavors in like cereal, that's where I start to get nervous. That sentence is not always bad, but it certainly can be. Artificial sweeteners, not a big fan of that. Personally, I think you should avoid artificial sweeteners like the plague. That is going to be things like Sweet and Low, Splenda, Equal. That's what are all those? Aspartame, sucralose, monosodium potassiate, or monosodium glutamate. Is that what it is? That's MSG. I actually like MSG. What is that stuff? Anyway. Actually, those are fine. Yeah, saccharin, aspartame. I don't like those at all. Sucralose, I'm not a big fan of either. Erythritol, though, that's a sugar alcohol. I've got nothing against that. Or xylitol, these are both sugar alcohols. I have nothing against those, but I don't like sucralose, right? Sucralose, I believe, is Equal. Aspartame, sucralose is Splenda. Aspartame is Equal, and saccharin is Sweet and Low. All three of those are chemicals that have been linked to various different types of cancers. Stevia and sugar alcohols, not so much. So if you want to do those types of artificial sweeteners, I'm fine with it. But that's why whenever I buy a protein powder, I always look to see if it has sucralose in it, because that's probably the most common. So obviously, if you are exercising regularly, like I said, protein supplementation can be helpful. Protein shakes are a good way to ensure you get a bunch of protein after your workout. Very easy to drink. very convenient. So before exercise, try to get some protein to make sure that you have some amino acid pool in your body as you start working out. You can even be repairing that muscle during your workout. So we like a little bit of protein pre-workout. 1 to 4 hours, maybe 2 to 4 ounces of like a lean protein source or a shake. Then after exercise, you want somewhere between 6 and 20 grams of protein post-workout bare minimum. You can go a little bit higher than that if you want to go into like the 30 or 40 gram range. That's actually fine. I know that there is some rumors out there about you can only process so much protein at a time. That's not entirely true. But yeah, I mean, if you do get too much of it, your body can only use so much, so it'll just convert the other ones to carbs, but it's not like it's going to get converted to fat or anything. So we know protein is super essential, whether you are a trained person or an untrained person. We need to make sure that we are getting a full amino acid profile. So generally what we recommend is to put our clients into a positive nitrogen balance. We have more nitrogen coming in than there is nitrogen going out, like a positive checking balance. You know what I mean? And if you do that, you're going to ensure that like you are always in a state of repair and you can actually build muscle. And that's protein, guys. Any questions on that? Am I feeling good? Guys, you survived. That was the whole lesson. That was 83 slides today. I appreciate all of you sticking with me because that one got long. Fair warning, it is also going to happen tomorrow. There's another long lesson tomorrow. We're looking at vitamins and minerals, but we'll take a look at our vitamins and minerals, antioxidants, and how those all interact with the body. And today we talked about the energy stuff. Tomorrow we'll talk about the nutrient stuff. Not the, these aren't all.
Quick question.
Yeah.
So for protein, okay, say if you don't have, like, you're not close to somewhere to get something to eat right away, but you are close to, let's say, pretty much I'll say like a quick stop or a little market. This is what I used to recommend, honestly, but I wouldn't recommend anybody eating the food from a Quickie Mart thing or anything. Like, I would highly not recommend that. But beef jerky.
Yeah, it's going to be really high in sodium, so you're going to want to watch out for that. But yeah, okay. It'd be a really good source of
because that, like yesterday, I didn't eat nothing before I went to the gym. The only thing I ate was these. They're like, I guess they're. Here, I'll show you much because I love beef jerky. Yeah. So this is what they are.
Yeah. So that's going to be pretty high in saturated fat and sodium. Which, if you have cardiovascular disease or if you're at risk for cardiovascular disease, those are generally two things that we recommend avoiding because sodium can harden your arteries and saturated fat can block your arteries, right?
Okay.
So would I give that advice to somebody? Sure, as long as they don't have heart disease. Yeah. I think it can be a fine recommendation. Somebody in your situation, probably a great option, But, we always do got to look at all factors when we're looking at nutrition. So is it good advice? But I always say this when I talk about nutrition, there is no good or bad advice. It's all going to depend on the person, Yep. But yeah, that's a good question.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Kill the